Welcome to another episode of Keys to Success with myself, Gypsea. That's the biggest challenge, overcoming fear and actually going past that. Welcome to another episode of Keys to Success with myself, Gypsea. Today's guest is a seasoned property valuer. He's been on the ground for quite a long time. He's one of the directors at Herron Todd White. Welcome, Tod Gillespie.
Thanks, Gypsy.
You're welcome. When I said seasoned, I didn't mean that in a rude way, but
I
long
thought
time.
you were talking about the salt and pepper and the hair.
That is a great one. How long have you been doing it for, being a property valuer?
February was 30 years.
30 years, so it's like my age.
It's scary, isn't
I'm
it? Now I
31.
feel seasoned, don't I?
So what got you into property valuing? Tell us a bit about your story.
So my father was in insurance and he was on Hamilton Island doing a survey on a charter boat.
Okay.
And one of the original partners of Herron Todd White was staying on Hamilton Island valuing Hayman Island.
Wow.
And Dad knew him and came home and said, I've organised work experience. I found the job for you. This is what you're going to do. And so, yeah, year 12, which was 1989, I did work experience in Herron Todd White in their office.
How old were you?
I was 18.
What? Crazy.
And, so there we are. 35 years later, I'm there.
And so that's
It's
where you
still there.
started, when you were
Yeah.
that young. So you don't know anything else.
No, I worked in Myer, sold shoes. I sold
Were you good
TV
at it?
and hi-fi. Yeah, I was really good at TV and hi-fi.
Okay.
I worked at Athlete's Foot, sold shoes. I was a McDonald's kid to start with, so learnt process,
Yeah.
which I think all kids should do. Work for a fast food chain first, so
Yeah.
learn how to do things quickly and efficiently.
I agree. Our EA, Grace, she worked at McDonald's before. She managed it before she started with us. And she is a weapon. Like, she has some great skills and can multitask, because Macca's, you've got people yelling at you, trying to get orders,
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So
Great
it's
skill
a very
to
good
learn.
grounding. So
How good.
yeah, sort of like cars, really, for real estate.
Yes. Yeah. So I did sell cars before real estate, which was interesting journey. But at 7 years, you learn some skills because you're client facing all the time. Rather than real estate, it's like more, you're a lot on the phone and things like that. Is most of your work face to face?
Probably 50% of the day you're outside, inspecting houses, talking to clients, going through their properties. And then the other half of the day is report writing, which is doing residential valuations. It's like doing homework, whereas the guys who do commercial do way fewer properties. So it's more like writing assignments. So
Yeah.
we feel like we have the more fun, but they like what they do. So,
Yeah, cool.
horses for courses.
And you specialize in what type of valuations?
So predominantly prestige residential. So I try and kick in around that sort of $3 million mark up to 30, 40. There's not a lot at that price level on the coast.
Yeah. Good market to tap into though.
It's fun. Yeah. It's definitely fun going through, beautiful homes and seeing, really cool architecture and design. So that's the best part of the job for me.
Is that why you chose that price point? Because you enjoy it, or?
Yeah, I think so. That, and when you're dealing with high net worth individuals with high quality property, you can't send a junior in. They want to speak to the boss. If anything ever goes wrong, you get called anyway. So about 15 years ago, we made a decision that only the senior own or shareholders or partners, directors would do the high quality, high end properties.
Yeah, okay.
And that's worked out to be a very good decision for the people that we deal with. So
Yeah, good for you too, because
Yeah.
you get to move into that rank, which is nice.
that's right.
And who do you were saying you love to look at architecture and the nice properties. Who's your standout architects? that you
I'm a
like?
big Baden Goddard fan. I'm
Okay.
biased too because I've known him since I was at school, but I just like the timeless design of a lot of his homes that, when you start looking along Albatross Avenue, One Albatross and Tide Mark, those homes will still look great in 20 years, and they're already, 15 years old now.
So true. Yeah, number one, it's just like a timeless piece, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful house.
Yeah. What are some of your favourite homes that you've seen?
Oh, the big Balinese home on the Corso that sold last year. That's a beautiful house.
What'd that one go for again?
Was it 25? I
Yeah,
think?
wow.
Yeah, so
You got to value that one?
long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
It's hard. We can't really, it's one of those things, privacy laws, you can't really talk so much about whose houses you've been in.
Sorry, I
But-
don't want to get you
but-
in trouble. We'll get all
But
the
we get to go
secrets.
through I go through open homes too, just to see what they're like. So it's funny when you're doing it for work because you have to, but then on the weekend you see a really cool house. You're like, oh, I'm definitely going through that to have a look.
Yeah.
so-
Well, because you appreciate it and it's something that you're interested in, right? Like
Yes.
if you appreciate good architecture, then if something's open, you want to go have a little sticky bee.
That's right.
We're
Yeah,
the same.
exactly.
Well, I am, I know. Even if another agent's got something open, I'll want to go and have a look because I appreciate a beautiful home.
And it's easy because when that sells for you, you can firsthand tell the people what the difference is to why they got that price, in your opinion, to what you're selling because you've been through it. And that's
For
why,
sure.
with the valuation, with only the senior people doing the luxury property, we're getting through more and more of them. So when someone throws a sale at you and says, oh, we should be worth more because of this house, and you say, oh, actually, I've been in that house and this blah, 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 and it's this big and it's got this many cars in the basement or whatever it is, and you know straight away of the answer that without shooting them down, solidifies the position of why your valuation was what it was.
Yeah, that's key, right? Is having that market knowledge. It's so important to have
Yeah,
because
data is so important.
and sets you apart from probably some of the other valuers as well that don't have that knowledge. I mean, a lot that I speak to have done it for a long time, but I don't know if 35 years is probably the top of the chain. And what do you love about your role?
I think besides the architecture, I meet some really cool people. I like getting outside. I could never have been, an accountant or a lawyer, and kudos to the guys who do that. But I couldn't sit in an office all day, every day. It's I need to be outside. And when I was looking at valuation, I was really interested in building at the time.
Okay.
But Dad was keener for me to go to uni and do something other than a trade, and so that was why we went that way. I also looked at accounting and went and did some work experience with Trio Ford in Southport, who no longer exists, but that was really boring.
Yeah, I could tell that you probably wouldn't have suited that job. You seem like you're a social butterfly. You like to get out and network and meet people, so it's probably a good role for you.
Yeah.
I guess just talking about the Gold Coast market in that price range, like what have you noticed in the last couple of years that's really changed for the Gold Coast and the luxury market space?
Well, there's a lot more of it because people stuck to a price range in a suburb. Like, we're seeing sales at $7 million on the canal in Mermaid Waters when no one ever previously spent anything more than possibly what the land value was that they were building on. So if they were buying back, before COVID, it might have been $1 million for a block of land. They didn't really spend more than $1 million on a house. Now they're buying a $2.5 million or $3 million block of land and spending more on the house and then making profit on the sale. So we've seen this new phenomenon of these bigger, bolder homes that are really drawing in, especially the interstate people with that wow factor.
Yeah, so there's definitely a demand for the high-end market is what you're saying,
Yeah.
because people want to come in and buy something that's already been built. I think I heard an interview that you'd spoken with, I think it was with Joe, and you guys were talking about that and how people from Melbourne and Sydney, they don't have those connections on the ground like we do. They don't know the builders or the architects, so they want to come somewhere and pay for a product that's finished because that rules out all that groundwork for them,
That's right.
playing test dummy.
Exactly. Turn up, buy your furniture, move in. You've got a builder's warranty in place, and it's ready to go. Rather than trying to, especially if you bring a family, try and find, okay, not only do you have to find a school for the kids, you've got to find a rental. Then, as you said, meet all the different architecture trades and everybody with the builders to try and put something together, which could take, for a big house, it'd be 2.5 years.
Absolutely.
Which is a lot of rent if you have a big family.
So true. And that not just the rent, but like if they do have a mortgage on the land and then the build and all of those things for 2 years now, it's a crazy amount of money to hold for that period of time. And we've seen like a lot of our clients that have, purchased land to build. They're trying to find properties that they can sort of live in for a little bit and, potentially make it more livable, even if it is a knockdown. So they have that period rent free while they, get plans and things like that drawn
That's right.
up.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a big cost.
What are you finding on the coast at the moment, like the key sort of hotspots and suburbs?
It's really interesting. It's because most booms, the whole coast goes. This time it's really been more about sort of main beach south. So the beach has been the big draw card. In the last boom, we saw Sovereign Islands, became a real force in the prestige market because it was still developing and the homes got bigger and bigger through the previous boom. Sanctuary Cove's always been there, but I guess, newer land estates are further from the village. So we're seeing a lot of knockdown rebuilds and major renovations on the older homes in Sanctuary Cove. But you're not seeing a lot of brand new builds. That still seems to be down this end of the coast. So really it's your beachside strip right through, from, as I said, from Main Beach to, to Currumbin and further, because we're seeing buildings that we've never seen. The quality of the buildings now being built along Balinga, whereas they were always, a cheaper product. So it's, and then you get right down the Rainbow Bay where they're building spectacular apartments. And everyone says, oh, it's a lot of money for Rainbow Bay, but there's no beachfront housing. There's only apartments, because you're either at Palm Beach for a direct beachfront house. If you want to live anywhere near Coolangatta, you have to be in an apartment. So, there's only a small number of properties that look at the beach and, Rainbow Bay, and that's so they're going to get the premium.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying everything that's sort of close to the beach is performing the best? Is that
I would
fair
think
to
so,
say?
yeah. And then you get under the $1 million into that price point of that 700,000 to $1 million is still really strong, because it's scarily it's affordable. It's it doesn't sound affordable, but that's the price bracket. And we're seeing houses like in Coomera and Pimpamar, they've gone up 10% this year. So
wow.
It might have been 700 in January, and they're talking 770, and it's pretty common to see there's a new price point out there, because there's so much demand for those homes.
So that $700 to $1 million price point is performing well, but that's predominantly for homes, you're saying? So
yes,
rather than, because obviously I sell predominantly in 4218, where 700 probably just get you a unit or an apartment. Is that price bracket still performing well in the unit sector, or more so like the housing?
See, in the fringe areas, it's more about housing, because they want the housing, so they're driving that market to get a house. As you said, if you're talking 4218, 700 would be hotly contested for an apartment, because there isn't a lot of it. So
yeah, there's not a lot left.
No.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Hey, like $1 million property before COVID was expensive, or 1.5 would get you on the water in a nice house, and now can't even really get a unit.
No, now
for
it's
that.
pretty much double. That's right.
It's insane. And what do you think is going to happen in the next sort of 12 months? I'm sure everyone asks you that. We were laughing about it before, because you're like, I'm not an economist, but people come to you for that all the time.
Well, they do, I guess. And because we've seen the cycles, like because I started in 94, which was a flat market, after the 89, 90 boom, and then it died, and then 94 it was flat right through till 2000. And what happened was GST came in, and we had like a boom where prices doubled. And like, to give an example, I had a house in Sorrento. I think I paid 215 or 220,000 for a dry block. Renovated it, sold it 2 years later for 465. So more than doubled my money.
Wow.
That
You're saying,
house,
sorry to cut you off, but that flat period was for 6 years, is what you were saying?
Yes, yeah, it was really flat in that late 90s period, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but then, it went from 2000 to 2003. It was really strong. It doubled. Then it paused, and everyone thought the market was going to fall. And the market actually then went the other way, and it kicked again right through the 2007. And sometimes I'm feeling like where we're at the moment is similar to that 2004 period, where we've had this enormous growth. The market slowed off a bit. Now it seems to be gaining a bit of momentum. So if interest rates come down soon, I think the market will probably kick again, which could be scary, because if it kicks too hard, well, then you've got the bigger risk that comes off because it's gone up too much. Whereas if the interest rates go up a little bit, my hand's going the wrong way, but if the interest rates go up a little bit and scare people, well, then I think we'll have a pause for a little while before we'll still see some growth again once the rates come down, because there's a lot of people waiting for rates to come down.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We have buyers that we've been helping for, 2 to 3 years. Like, I just sold one, I won't say again for privacy, but we were helping them to look beachside for 2 years. They were looking, and they ended up buying on the canal because they just got priced out.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the things that are limited in supply, they just keep growing in price, and it's only going to keep happening.
Well, that's it. As long as we're still getting this interstate migration and they're coming in cashed up, because we forget what a good house in Sydney is compared to here. Like, there's a house in the harbour front in Sydney sold like 2 months ago. I think they got 60 million for it.
I saw that. That's crazy, isn't it?
And when you look at how big the land is and what they get, you can see why they come here and walk in and say, what, 7 million? I'll take it.
Yeah.
And we're saying, wow, 7 million's a lot for that house. And they're like, oh no, that's cheap.
Yeah.
Because what they're comparing it to is so different. So I think as long as we continue to get this migration from down south, and then locally the economy's strong in the upper end, and because whilst things are tough and yes, people are battling with interest rates, wages are still generally going up. It's just the cost of living that's obviously going up along with it. But there's, I think as long as the economy holds where it is and we don't have anything major come, there's no reason to see why it wouldn't go up again as the rates come off, because things will become cheaper again.
So true. And I think there's a lot of people that are waiting for that point, but they don't realize, like, yes, the rates may come down and potentially the end of the year or next year, but then prices will go up because everyone's trying to buy at the same time. So it's like...
And that'll be the interesting thing. That's right.
What do you think will happen with that?
Well, that's really hard. That's what we don't know, is how many buyers are sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to drop to make something more affordable, which isn't the right reason to be buying. To think we want something and we're only going to spend $2 million, but we're not going to spend $2 million until the interest rates come down because it'll be cheaper. Because one day those interest rates will go up again and they'll be in a position they don't want to be in. So hopefully there's not too many people in that scenario. But the people who are nervous, I think, and watching the economy and thinking what's going to happen, I think the interest rates coming off would give them the confidence to then get into the marketplace if they've been holding off.
Yeah, and there's definitely a few of those people. Like at our open homes, I know that there's many people that are thinking, oh, if it does drop, then we'll go. And they've been coming to our open homes for years, and we're thinking, oh my God, you've missed the mark. You know, the market's just kept moving with you. So it's hard to predict, and I think that would be difficult in your job. But I had a client the other day. It's very interesting, very analytical man. He had multiple agents that came through the house, and then he had a property valuer come out. And he asked me, he's like, how do they value my property? And I was like, that's such a great question. I really should get a property valuer on the podcast and share it with him, because he did get a valuation come through, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me sharing, but he was, giving reasons why it was wrong.
Yes.
And how do you combat that, and how do you actually value a home?
Well, the first thing from a valuation point of view is you have to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. So you need to get yourself in the mindset, I want to live in this suburb, I like the street, I can afford the house, and it suits what I want to do. So almost try and make yourself a little emotional positively about the property, because that's what buyers are. So you need to get into that mindset first. And then really you're going through and you're looking at aspect, size of rooms. If it's an old house, ceiling height's really important, because if it's the 2.4 ceilings, you renovate it, everyone knows it's a renovated house. Whereas if you can buy an older house that has 2.7 ceilings, which is what the current standard is for even a cheaper home now is 2.7, you can renovate that. And if you're clever with a reno, people won't realise that the house initially was possibly as old as it was.
That's a really good tip for people that are buying.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off there.
That's
Look for
right.
ceiling height. Take
Ceiling
your measuring
height,
tape with you.
Yeah. And if it's an older house that's been renovated too, be careful that the ceiling height isn't under 2.4, because sometimes people will lay tiles over tiles and all of a sudden you have a 2.36 or 2.38 ceiling, which is actually then not compliant with council.
Crazy.
So that's something to watch out for. But we're also then looking at room sizes, layout of the house, and for an older home, what the renovation potential is. Do we think it adds value, or do you think it's more likely they'll knock it down? Modern homes, as we're talking about before, we look at things, as functionality of the space. So you might have a beautiful big void, but could it have been better suited to another purpose, or is it just sending TV noise up through the ceiling to the whole house? So how does that work? And different buyers will have different viewpoints on those anyhow. But yeah, as I said, aspect, so whether it's water or your rear yard, what views you might have. You're looking at everything, appliances, quality of tapware, quality of even the workmanship on the tiling. Like I always walk in and have a look and see if the tiles have been mited on the edges, or if they've just stuck a steel strip on them. And if they've done it well, it can look good. But if they haven't done it well, it doesn't. So we're trying to look at everything, and then you're more or less going into your mind database of houses that have sold that you've been through, saying, okay, land size, how's it compare? What's the difference between this block of land and that block of land? If it's waterfront, what's the water frontage? How's that compare? What's the aspect to water? What are you looking at? You're looking at units behind Pacific Fair, or you're looking right up the length of the canal. As you get closer to the river, boating becomes more important. So what's a key line? Like how big a boat can you fit in You know, how is it if you're right in the corner of the canal, can you get a boat in there, or do you have to reverse it right up the canal to moor it, or can you turn it around depending on how wide the canal is? It just rolls on.
So many things.
And that's only talking about the land, and then obviously you're
Wow.
talking about the houses and how they compare. So, whereas units are way easier because units come back to size, ceiling height, functionality, the floor plan, and the pretty much the width of the unit to the view. So you can have two units, a beachfront one where only the lounge room looks at the ocean, or you can have a unit the same size where the whole unit looks at the bedrooms, look to the ocean as well, which is obviously more valuable. And car spaces for units. I think I personally wouldn't buy a unit without two car spaces in the basement.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now, especially beachside with that, just talking about the car parks, because I think eventually they'll change the zoning with how long you can park there with the tram going in, and those car spots never become more valuable.
That's right. And it's hard because you have visitors and most people have two cars, and parking's definitely a premium issue.
Crazy. So what you're saying is when you go into every single house, you act as if you're going to buy it, you get emotional about it, and then you analyze all of those things, and then that's how you do your homework, as you call it, when you go back to the office and work out what it's actually worth.
That's it. So you're looking at it, how's it compare? So what should they call the direct comparison approach? And then as a backup, you're looking and saying, okay, if it was a vacant block of land, and what would it cost to put the house there today new, and what would it effectively cost to make that current house new? So which is more or less a reverse way of looking at what's the depreciation on it, and how's that add up? And so you're looking and say, okay, well the math on that says this, my direct comparison says this, that supports it, and move on to the next one.
That's a big job. And you have like a checklist that you go through and you do all this?
Mentally, yeah.
After 34 years, it's pretty typed in there. How many valuations have you done in your time?
I added it up for the 30-year anniversary back in February, and it was 21,443.
That is insane.
It's pretty insane, yeah.
The seasoned valuer. Over 21,000 valuations.
Don't coin that phrase. I don't want to hear people down the street going, here comes
That's
the
the
seasoned
title
valuer.
of the podcast.
Here comes the seasoned
Salt and
valuer.
pepper. We'll just put a little pepper and salt. Oh, it's so funny. And can I ask you a question? When, say, for example, if somebody is getting a valuation done and they're wanting to have equity in the home, what are some ways that they can add value to it for when you're coming out? Obviously, to give a good impression to the valuer. Just some tips for the property owners.
Ideally, you want to present it as though you're trying to sell it, because whilst the valuer doesn't really care if it's messy, it's still in the back of your mind that that person still needs to be able to show it as a house to sell at some point. So you know, if there's marks on the walls or whatever, you just clean it up. If there's, like, we'll often go into a house and there's a water stain in the ceiling of the bathroom where there'd been a leak at some point in time, and the roof's been fixed, but they've not got around to painting it. Like, you get a guy in and, within a few days, get it just freshly painted, make it look nicer. Like, you just really want to keep it looking neat.
Yeah, so present it as if you were going to take it to market, which we always suggest to, like, paint it, landscape it, tidy it.
Yes, but you don't need to do that for evaluation, because we can see behind, but we can see apart from that. But it needs, you don't want to walk into a house to do evaluation and there's underwear all on the floor in the master bedroom and hair all on the floor in the ensuite and everything. It's nicer to walk into something that presents reasonably, that you then have the confidence that, look, if this thing's going to be sold, it's going to present well.
Help get you emotional about it as well.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So getting it tidy, is there anything else that you think would add value to a property?
If you see, you wouldn't do it just for evaluation, because we're not going to be so concerned. But as you said, if I was selling an older home today that I owned, I would consider whether or not I did carpets. If they were reasonable, I'd definitely have them cleaned properly. I'd probably paint, do LED lights. I'd either change the fans or make sure there wasn't a speck of dust on them and the blades weren't flaking off or anything. And as you said, mulch the gardens, get everything clean, tidy, declutter.
Freshen it up.
Because you want someone to walk in, as you said, and be emotional about it. So, walking in and saying, oh, that garden looks terrible, we have to do something with that. No, as soon as they see something wrong and they start picking at the bits, that buyer is going to be critical on the price. You want them to walk in and go, I love that, and that's amazing. And then hopefully build their love of the home and then all of a sudden they get emotional and pay more than they thought they would.
Perfect.
Ideal, yeah.
Yeah, and still be happy with their purchase.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is funny. That's a hard balancing act, right? Is to get a seller happy and a buyer happy. We kind of live in the middle ground there where you're trying to make everyone happy. But if you can get a house on the Gold Coast, I think you're doing pretty well because it's a tough market out there.
And sometimes, like, yes, the market's really strong, but if the vendors don't leave a little bit in there so the buyer thinks they've had a bit of a win, people won't forever in the day pay the record price. People want to walk away and think, hey, you know what, I would have paid a little bit more for that, but I'm happy that I got it for this.
Yeah.
Whereas, you see it where you get a buyer and a seller sometimes, and they are $50,000 apart on a $3.5 million contract or more, and you think, geez, you guys are so close, but no one's budging. Someone needs to give. Generally, in that situation, the vendor needs to give if he really wants to sell it, because otherwise they get to the situation where they might go stale in the marketplace if the house doesn't tick every box, and next thing you know, they're selling it for something a little bit less, like a unit I've just been to that had an offer at $6 million and is sold for less 2 months later because it didn't tick every box.
Yeah, so the greed kicked in. They thought they could get more, and anyways, that's up to the agent.
That's right. A good agent will drag the money out of them.
For sure. Can I ask, just on that record sales, like you just mentioned before, talking about record sales, how do you value something like that when a price has just been achieved that's, much above comparison what's been sold in the area?
It gets really difficult because if you're valuing it for a bank, so the standard for mortgage valuation, say if it's a $7 million house, they generally require 5 sales. They have to be settled, and generally the bank wants to see that they're within 10% of the purchase price and the last 6 months. So you're looking at a really small, market. So if there's not a lot of them, well, then you have to go further back and explain why you're using older sales. And if the market's improved, try and make a comment as to how, since that property sold, the market has improved and would now be a little bit more. So in some instances, you might not have that data yet. You might have something that's under contract, but that's only allowed to be relied on as secondary evidence. Your primary evidence has to be settled. So in the cheaper properties, you can use 3 sales, which is a lot easier. But when you get in the higher end, finding, if you're doing something for 7 million, you want sales from 6.3 or 6.25, say, to 7.75. And when you start looking at that price bracket, there's not a lot in it. So if you're doing something, say, the houses that are sold in Mermaid Waters, which I haven't done, but if I was, I'd be looking from Palm Beach to potentially, Paradise Waters to see what sales had been, understanding though that people buying Mermaid Waters probably wouldn't consider Paradise Waters, but there's still a comparison there that we can draw, even though that buyers probably wouldn't consider that, but we're looking more at the value than the person buying it.
Right, so you can cross over with suburbs when you're doing your valuation, because that would be hard, especially with like what we're finding in Mermaid Waters at the moment is that it's an older suburb, right? There's a lot of hot homes that were built in the 90s that don't necessarily get knocked down and completely renovated.
And 70s and 80s too.
Yeah, and prior, sorry. Yeah. But then the new builds, there aren't many of them that have kind of achieved a price. So in terms of getting a valuation and getting your comparable properties, they're not there. There's none.
That's right, and that's why you have to go further afield. And the hard part is what they're getting for some of the new properties at the moment. You could buy a main river property for similar or not much more, which traditionally has been more what buyers have wanted. But because we have this influx of interstate people who want the new house with, as we said before, the builder's warranty and everything, they're more interested in the beautiful new home with maybe across a quiet waterway than the block closer to the main river so they can get a boat and do the boating thing. Whereas in history on the Gold Coast, people moved up and they wanted a boat.
Yeah.
It's not such a thing these days. It's like tennis courts. There used to be a lot of tennis courts. People rarely build tennis courts anymore.
That's an expensive exercise to have a vacant block of land
that's right.
next to your house.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's interesting what you just said about the main river comment, because I think typically before COVID, for example, Broadbeach Waters was always the superstar, getting the great results and the big money. But a lot of the interstate people are looking at, surrounding suburbs, Mermaid Waters, even Burleigh Waters that don't even have water access and still paying a premium.
That's right.
Do you see that there is I guess, that big difference between the main river and the normal canals?
I personally still think there is, and I think the buyers probably aren't aware of the mechanics of the market and how that works. They're more interested in the location and the access to, I guess the beach and the cafe scene and the restaurants and that, which is why, what's a good example? So there's the house on Oceanic Drive that sold for 7.7, and now we've just had the house sell in San Remo Boulevard, north facing to the main river, for 8.1. They're probably not too dissimilar in size. The main river one faces north, has a beautiful long water view. The other one faces west, again with a long water view. But for the quality of the homes around them, the Sorrento property is way better than $400,000 gap between the two.
Yeah.
But the other one's a lot closer to the beach if that's what you're about.
Yeah, so it's not really always about the boat access. Sometimes people just want a beautiful view and to be close to the beach.
That's it, yeah. So that's where it's getting difficult, because that's a new market that we haven't had before, is that ultra luxury house in what was more of a secondary location compared to the main river and the existing prestige, Isla Capri, Paradise Waters scenario.
I think that comes back to knowledge as well from the buyers. If they haven't asked the right questions with the agent, like what is the height limit of the boat, or how long does it take me to get to Main River? And they don't realise those things until they've bought, and then they get the boat, and then it takes them
an hour
to get to the Main River, and they're over it by the time they get there.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting.
That probably won't go in your podcast, that bit.
Yeah. I would never.
What do you mean it takes an hour to get to the river?
Yeah. At 6 knots. Oh my God.
Yeah. Have you done 6 knots on the boat? And it's like,
yeah. You want a driver for that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. It's so much value, I think, for people that are listening as well, because I actually didn't realize about the sales and the 10% and how you can use sales from other suburbs when you are like curating your valuation. But obviously a lot goes behind it. What you were saying about the finishes and the fixtures and things like that. It's good for people to consider it that are renovating too, because I know a lot of people that listen to this or, follow my journey or buy from me, they're looking to flip. So things like what you mentioned about the ceiling height and then, the quality of the fixtures that they use, knowing that will add value and be something that's measured in the future is really good to know.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, is there anything else you want to leave with for our listeners today?
The only other thing, and which we get with valuation, that's just one of the things that happens, is we'll often do a valuation and they'll come to us and say, but this house just sold for this. The hardest thing is a valuation's a point in time. So if I valued the house last Thursday and something sells today, it didn't exist last Thursday, so you can't consider it because it's past the date.
Crazy.
Yeah. Like legally, they're saying, well, if you got tested in court, they'd say, how can you value it at that day at this when you didn't know that because it didn't happen yet? So you could revisit it if you had to and go back out and look at the property again. If you thought it was going to make a difference to the valuation, you would then have to go and inspect the property again that you looked at so that you're inspecting it after that sale date to then use that sale.
Sounds like a lot more work for you, but it's good if you need to achieve that valuation.
Or if it assists the client, yeah.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
that I want everyone doing that to me.
No, and you definitely don't want to have to go to court to fight it as well.
No, that's right. Never want to do that. Haven't had to, so touch wood. Yeah.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you that. Have there been any challenges being a valuer where it hasn't stacked up? And
there's always threats and people who get upset. You don't get a lot of thank yous, but you get a lot of the negative comments. It's just what it is. But 30 years, you forget about it pretty quick.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just slide off the back. Well, thank you for 30 years of providing value to the Gold Coast. I always like to finish on a quote or something that I guess you can share with listeners that maybe has served you even in business, that I think sometimes we get, pretty overwhelmed with the amount of work that we have to do. Is there like a mantra or a quote that you use that keeps you centered?
I like Warren Buffett's, when the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming naked.
Okay.
Which more or less means that, whilst things are going really well, everything looks great on the surface, but what you don't know what's actually happening in the background, and maybe things aren't as rosy as they are. So, don't get yourself in too deep in whatever you're borrowing to buy, because if that tide goes out, you don't want to be exposed.
Definitely not naked on the Gold Coast beaches.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Tom.
No worries, Gypsy.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.